Well, my name is Bill Fanning. I think we have a lot of people who have been on the call before, and we still have some people trickling in. So glad you're all here. Like always, if you have the ability to turn your camera on, it's awesome. Makes it a little more of a conversation, but if you can't, totally understand. Always like to ask though. And we're going to be talking about sales hiring and some of the challenges around with it. Hey, Courtney, I'm jealous now. Highly jealous. I should have done that myself. That looks so much better than sitting in here.
Needed some outside time.
Absolutely. I could use some outside time. I've got inside time with a very loudly snoring black lab at my feet, which is not the same. So
it's got to be freezing up there though, Bill, huh? I mean, it's like in the 40s here in the New York area.
It was 29, felt like 17. A little while.
Great.
Yeah, but the sun's out and things turning green. So I can delude myself that it's warm just by turning the heat up and making the house hot. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad you're here. And for those of you who are new, my name is Bill Fanning, and we're going to have a conversation today that I think will be really fun. I've invited Ben, who is the founder and CEO of Objective Management Group, who, by the way, has the best acronym in the business of talent acquisition, OMG. So, I literally had something on my desk the other day, and my daughter was like, "You shouldn't be saying OMG at work." And I'm like, no, that's a company. She was like, "Oh, I thought you were texting people." And I was like, no. So it was kind of funny. So couple quick updates. As I've mentioned a couple times, we are in the process of putting together an updated version of Talk. It's going to be on a commercially available platform called Circle. If anyone's used Circle in the past, it's really great. But what it allows us to do is to increase the communication capabilities and a lot of different variations of how we can talk and things we can do without having to build it, which makes it much faster and much more scalable and makes the talk experience much better. So I'm really excited about it. We're going to actually be recording our first podcast tomorrow morning. I've already got people signed up and ready to go. But if anybody is interested in ever participating in one of the podcasts, and really just to give you a breakdown, what it is, it's called, I think we're going to call it Talking Talent. And it's just a conversation around key topics that myself and a couple of members of Talk will get together and talk for 30 minutes. We'll record on Fridays, release the next following week. And if anyone would like to be part of it, that link that you see on the screen, we'll bring it to you. And I will also, in just a second, drop it into chat. We have some great discussions coming up. We're going to be talking about inclusive hiring with Rocky Howard. We're going to be talking about using AI to generate job descriptions and some of the ways that AI can help in some of that capability. We're going to be talking about building resiliency in a team. Did I spell that right? I don't think I did. I don't know. So if anyone wants to be part of that, it's a great person joining us. And I think the goal of that is, with all the craziness we have going on right now in the world, in our economy, resiliency is a key attribute that's, I think, going to get us through it. Then I have a gentleman joining us to talk about agentic AI and what that is, and how having agents in AI is kind of a growth pattern of that technology and what it's going to enable us to do. And then I have a gentleman on the 22nd, Trent Cotton, who's big on LinkedIn, if any of you have seen him, coming to talk about becoming a talent engineer. And the goal of, or the concept behind a talent engineer is a little bit behind the impact of AI on the talent acquisition process and how we're going to engineer the use of the human side and the talent side, or the AI side, and making that all come together in one journey that is beneficial to the candidate and making it an experience that they enjoy and they apply and all of those great things. So that's what's coming up. Excited about it. If you're new to Talk or you joined us from LinkedIn, I don't think we have many folks here, but if you have, come on in and join. It's free. This QR code will bring you right in. It's very easy to sign up with your LinkedIn profile, and we'd love to have you be part of our community. Final thing I wanted to talk about was TalentSphere, which is a conference we're doing in Scottsdale in June. And it's going to shaping up to be an amazing event. It's a retreat style experience. It's not like a traditional conference. We're going to have a heavy focus on wellness and a break between conference events and enjoying ourselves for networking. We've got some amazing speakers coming. All of the sessions are designed to be collaborative or interactive, so we walk away learning something and don't just sit there and listen. And the best part about it is that everyone who is going to be on stage talking is a fellow talent acquisition practitioner. So there's not vendors getting up and talking about their product. We're people in the industry talking about the challenges, the processes, the things we're dealing with, and how we're improving the TA experience. And hopefully that will give us all something we can walk away with key insights, great learnings, and an expanded network. So I'm going to introduce Ben, and I'm going to let him spend a little bit talking about himself in just a minute. But he's joined us because he's built OMG, which is Objective Management, which is a great sales assessment platform. But before we got into that, I wanted to just take a quick second and run a quick poll to learn a little bit about how all of us look at talent acquisition hiring. By the way, and this, if anyone has, this is a picture from a movie, which is called Glengarry Glen Ross. And if anybody has not seen it and wants to have the insight into what sales is like, that's probably over the top a little bit, but it's a great movie to watch if you want to make sure you made a great choice in your career by not going into sales. That will definitely set the tone for that. So hang on one sec. I wanted to run a quick poll, and so what I'm hoping to if you guys could help answer this, and hopefully everyone can see it, is as you think about sales hiring, if this is an area you hire for, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're struggling with? And so let me know if you can see the poll, and if you can't see it. All right, relaunch poll. All right, you should be able to see it now. And so the question really is just, what are some of the key things that you find challenging when you're hiring salespeople? I will tell you that one of, and this is definitely an open question for anyone else. If any, and by the way, if there's something that's not on this list, feel free to drop it into chat. One of the things that I have found as a challenge when I go to hire salespeople is they're really good at selling themselves. And that is a really interesting attribute, because when you're talking to somebody and you're assessing their skill set and their background and all of those great things, and they do an amazing job of presenting themselves, sometimes that can create what I put in here is a little bit of bias, right? Oh, this guy's or this girl's fabulous. Let's go meet them. But what happens is you haven't assessed their skill set and their background and their ability to deal with some of the traditional challenges a sales career has. And you've taken a lot up front, which I've in my earlier career as a sales manager felt guilty to. And it makes the probability, it's not saying you can't hire a good salesperson from that, but it makes the probability of hiring a bad salesperson go up significantly. All right. So thank you everyone for taking a moment to do that. I'm going to end the poll. So when we look at this, finding candidates with the right sales DNA, traits, drive, coachability, are really a key attribute to hiring someone. I think that's dead on. Accurately assessing skills and performance potential is another challenge. Ensuring strong cultural and team fit is definitely important as well. And, managing turnover and top performers is one that I think is important, but I don't necessarily know it comes to part of the hiring challenges, except for looking at somebody's ability to become a top performer in your organization. And that's really a key attribute as you're bringing people. So I'm going to shut that down, and I'm going to turn off my screen share. And Ben, maybe if you could take a minute and just introduce yourself to everybody and share a little bit about your background, and then we can start talking a little bit about sales hiring.
Of course. Well, Bill, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to spend a little bit of time with all of you this afternoon. I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself and about Objective Management Group. And I've got to be a little rude and correct the record, which is you said that I'm the founder and CEO. That's not quite accurate. I am the CEO of Objective Management Group, but I actually didn't found the company. Objective Management Group has been around for over 35 years at this point. And, I was maybe a little bit of a precocious child, but I wasn't starting sales assessment companies when I was 3 years old. I acquired the company. I raised some private equity money, and I acquired the company with private equity backing from the original founder about 2.5 years ago, and stepped in as the CEO, and I've been running it ever since. So just wanted to get the record straight on that. Always want to give credit where credit is due, because the founder is just a fantastic and really visionary person who built the product. What is Objective Management Group, or OMG as the kids call it? It is a sales skills assessment. So in the same way that you might give your developers that you're hiring a coding test to make sure that they actually understand whatever Python or front-end language you need them to code in, you can give your sales candidates our test, and it helps you to understand if that candidate has fundamental B2B selling skills and selling behaviors that we find are critical in every selling function. We also allow you to calibrate the assessment so that you're screening not just across all of our fundamental competencies that we measure, but you're screening for the ones that are most critical to the role that you're hiring for. We'll get into that in a lot more detail, so I'll stop there for now. Bill, is this a good time to transition into the some of the data that I was going to share?
We can definitely do that. As you're bringing that up, I'm curious though, from a TA function, I know sometimes we all have specific areas that we focus on. Just by a show of hands, how many folks here are have sales as part of their hiring responsibilities? Bob has it. Summer, Courtney has it. Great. Josh, thanks everybody. I'm curious. I tried to present a point of view. I'm curious if there's anything that you feel is a challenge in sales hiring that I might have missed, or you want to make sure is on the list, because it gives us, it makes sure that we focus and learn from that. So anybody have anything that you think we might have missed?
I'll chime in. I think one of the biggest challenges with sales hiring is oftentimes hiring managers can get very stuck on profile and experience and lose sight of character and coachability and kind of more focus on skill versus will, right? So designing a recruiting process that really allows and digs into areas that allows you to hire folks that could bring different perspectives, different ideas, but have that kind of similar drive. So I think it's definitely a challenge that I've faced over the years of getting hiring managers to think out of the kind of box there.
Yeah, no, Summer, I think you nailed something that's incredibly valuable, which is the length of being a salesperson is not necessarily tied to your effectiveness at selling. Sometimes what I've found in hiring salespeople is that people who are a little earlier in their career are more malleable and can come in and be incredibly effective because they don't bring what I would call sales history or baggage or previous sales things, or we all learn and do things a certain way, and over time we can become kind of set in our approach to doing things. And earlier, somebody who hasn't been doing it for 20 years is definitely an interesting attribute to consider. And I think, Peter, you just you nailed it as well. The right DNA, customer service orientation is definitely a key piece as well. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
And the ICE in our interview process, I'm not super familiar with ICE. Summer, can you share for a second what that's about?
Sure. So it stands for intelligence, character, coachability, and experience. Specifically, experience is last, right? So again, if you think about, it's important to tie into like successful AEs at your organization. Intelligence for us is folks that understand managing complex solutions or complex problems. They have emotional intelligence to read the room, to understand pain points of their customers. So we developed several questions to pull out like characteristics of individuals on that. Character, again, you really want to tie it into your successful AEs. What's the character of these folks that really drive them? Coachability, are people coming in with a willingness to learn, and have they failed in the past? And if so, what did they learn from that, right? So those three things are the things that we focus on the most, with experience kind of sprinkled throughout the questioning.
Awesome. I think that's great. And that is, I have two favorite questions that I love to ask people when I interview them for sales roles. The first one is, tell me about the time you had a deal that you thought you were going to win for sure and you lost. And what did you learn and why? And then the second question I always ask people is, tell me the time that you had a deal that you absolutely were sure you were going to lose and you did something to bring that deal back to life and to win. And walk me through what that process as well. Because what I'm always interested in is the thinking capability and problem solving capability of a person, and also the humility, because we're all going to get our butt kicked in sales on a deal. It's just how sales works. But the key going back to character is to be able to check the ego at the door and be able to learn from that experience. And if you can have that type of thought process of, okay, what can I do differently so this doesn't happen again? Then what you find is a very coachable and scalable salesperson, which I really like. So awesome, guys. Thank you for that. All right. So Ben, I'd love to. And so I invited Ben here, by the way, just because he's doing something really cool in this area. And I wanted him to share some of his learnings and experience. So Ben, why don't you share with us some of the data you and I went over a little bit earlier?
Of course. Yeah, Bill, thanks. Maybe just a quick show of hands. You can just put in the chat or on the screen. How many folks, it sounds like a lot of the folks on here have sales hiring as sales talent acquisition as part of their responsibility. How many of you feel like you've been burned by a bad sales hire in the past? How many of you feel like you might get burned by sales hires more than other business functions that you're responsible for TA for? I'll raise my hand again.
Yeah.
And how many of you are hiring or actively engaged in hiring salespeople this year? Anyone? Great. So I like to start this conversation. Bill and I were talking about this before we kicked off the webinar. I like to start by talking about the stakes. Because sales is really hard to hire for, arguably the hardest function to hire for, and it's really costly when we get it wrong. So there's a consulting firm out there some of you might have run into. It's called SBI Growth, and according to them, about a third of all salespeople fail in their first year on the job and are fired. And this is B2B salespeople. This isn't, like a retail high turnover retail sales position. So if you we're going to do some bad math. So it's after lunch, no one can think that much. We're just going to do some really rough math. Let's say you were going to pay the average AE salary in a major city, which is about $100,000. It's 95, so we'll round up. A 30% failure rate, your expected loss on that position, it's about $30,000 just on the direct costs. And then it gets worse from there. So there's a firm that I do some work with called EBSTA, and they're basically a data kind of normalization platform that sits on top of all the major CRM systems, HubSpot, Salesforce, and they're able to pull in the data from all the different CRM systems. They publish a report every year based on what their data is sharing. And one of the things that they found is that last year, 75% of the salespeople in their database missed on quota. And it wasn't just that they missed by a little bit. It wasn't that their quota was 1 million and they had 850,000 or something. What was even more scary is they found that just 16% of salespeople in their database contributed over 80% of the revenues that all the companies in their databases generated. So the implication of this is the vast majority of salespeople, well over 80% of salespeople, they're not just below quota, they are producing absolutely nothing, zero. And so if your partners in finance are pulling together a hiring plan and a budget and a ramp plan, and you're expecting that a salesperson who you hire in the plan, they're going to bring in a quota of $1 million once they're fully ramped. Well, with a miss on quota attainment of 75%, you're going to have a revenue hole in your plan of about $750,000. And so take that together with what you've already spent on the salary, and that one wrong hire ends up costing your company on average almost $800,000. These are big numbers. And if you think about the time that you spend and the amount of cats that you need to herd between your colleagues in talent acquisition and sales leadership and other parts of the company to get this position scoped out and hired for, it's even more painful. It's even more costly. So we talked a little bit about who we are. I'll come back to this at the end of the presentation, talk more about kind of how our assessment works and how we help folks. But I just wanted to open it up. Why does this happen? Why is it that, and why are we accepting this? I think if our colleagues in the CFO's office were risking $800,000 for a position that they thought might bring in $1 million, someone would have hit pause a long time ago, and we'd have come up with a better way. Why is sales hiring so hard to get right? I'm curious. What do you guys find as your common frustrations? I heard some of them. The hiring managers don't think out of the box. It's hard to get folks with the right DNA. What else do people run into? Why do you think this is so difficult for us?
It's very competitive. I mean, if you're looking for a great salesperson, so is everybody else that's hiring. So if your bar is high, chances are that that person is talking to other companies like in the same vein.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right, Summer. Our data finds that the best sales talent is usually off the market in under 3 weeks. You've got about 18 days before you lose them. Catherine, I think that was a great point. I don't know if you're in a place where you can come off mute, but did you want to share that live?
Yeah, just a lot of roles I encounter, especially lately, the managers just don't want people who've moved even just every 1 to 2 years. They want someone who's grown their book of business and stayed a few years, but really an incentive for these people, as I'm looking, is, being able to go and grow as much as they can and move on and just keep growing their tiers, which I can understand as a young professional, but at least some of the culture here isn't very aligned with that.
Yeah. And Catherine, I'm sorry, Ben, I just want to say that's a really interesting point, because the average tenure time frame is decreased substantially in sales roles. From my understanding, it's running about 18 to 24 months, even for highly skilled competitive salespeople. So that type of thought from the hiring manager, I think, sometimes can bracket out high-performing salespeople that are moving for very valid reasons. So it comes back to the understanding of why the move happened that I try and dig into.
Yeah. I think, Bill, you're totally right. There's not enough, and I think this gets to Catherine's frustration. There's not enough conversation about why was this person moving so many times. Sometimes it might be a performance red flag, but think about the context of that we've been hiring in for the past, let's say, 5 years, or maybe go back even a little bit further, the past 10 years. We did a similar webinar with some of the people who work in my company, with the labor economists who focuses on skilled and white collar labor. And one of the things he pointed out is Gen Z and the millennials, the kind of later millennials, graduated in sort of some of the best economic environments in the zero interest rate environment, if you were trying to get a job in tech, that anyone had ever seen, where you had large tech companies throwing six-figure pay packages at 21, 22-year-olds who had very little experience. Who wouldn't jump at that every 6 months if you had the chance to? Of course you're going to take it, right? So we find that there are kind of four big issues. There are a lot, and I think folks are putting them in the chat. I would bucket the reasons why sales is so hard to hire for into four kind of major issues. The first is it is a really dynamic role. I joke with the clients that we work with that when was the last time that the requirements for what makes a great controller changed? And when was the last time that the CEO changed their go-to-market strategy? We don't change our financial strategy or the talent that's required to deliver on, closing the books every month. But CEOs, and I'm guilty of this, we love to change our go-to-market strategy every quarter. And that has serious ramifications for the talent that we need in order to meet that. I think this gets to something that Alexis put in the chat, which is teams aren't aligned on what it is that they're looking for. And that comes across when you focus the conversation on, okay, what competencies matter most for this job? I joke sometimes with the clients we work with, we take them through an exercise where we basically ask them to force rank the fundamental competencies. Do you need someone who can qualify? Or do you need someone who's really great at negotiating? Or do you need someone who's really good at a discovery call? They can only do one. Which is the one that you cannot compromise on? And you start to see these cracks and fissures in the hiring team because they all have kind of different points of view. And you realize that they're not aligned internally. I think, Summer, what you mentioned at the beginning of the call is a huge issue that just gives me shivers is we have a lot of folks in sales leadership, especially, who want to hire from intuition rather than hiring from a place of data. I think the most harmful phrase that you can hear in talent acquisition, especially in sales, is "this is the way I've always done it," or "I've got 20 years of experience doing it this way." Yeah. When you challenge them on it, it turns out they've got 20 years of experience getting burned. And I think the last, Bill, is something that you talked about, which is interviewing salespeople are different. Salespeople interview really well. And you have to have a process that is designed to help you disarm some of the ways that salespeople are really good at building rapport and showing up well and making a good first impression.
Yeah, Ben, I think you nailed. One of the things in all the organizations that I've been in, one of the first things I've done when we come to sales hiring is organizing a structured process. So everyone's evaluated by the same process, by the same criteria. And I think, to me, one of the biggest things that I've ever seen that causes failure in the sales hiring process is not being consistent in terms of how you evaluate talent coming in the door. If you don't evaluate people consistently, you open up the door for that bias to creep in by somebody, hiring manager, whatever, and then it becomes really challenging. So I think what you just said was really spot on.
100%. We'll talk more about. So what I thought we could do at this time is I want to make this interactive. Folks, just come off mute, chime in with your questions, your comments. But I wanted to maybe leave you all with some practical insights that you might take back to your organizations and talk to with your colleagues in sales, and hopefully, help relieve some of the frustration that you might face when it comes to hiring sales folks. Is that all right? Does that feel like a good use of the 30 minutes or so that we have left?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So we talk about sales being a really dynamic role. And one of the things something we do regularly, by the way, is, the companies that we work with about 2,000 companies a year on evaluating, helping them hire and develop their sales teams through our assessments. And we actually ran a survey recently on hiring practices. One of the questions we asked was, when was the last time you updated your job description for this sales position? And what we found was that about 20% of the companies that we were working with hadn't updated their sales job descriptions in over a year. And unfortunately, what we see is, the practice for a lot of these folks is they basically, when it's time to open up a rec for a new account executive or a new BDR, they take the Word doc from the last time that they hired an account executive or a BDR, and maybe they save down a new version of the Word doc or something like that, but just kind of dust it off and say, okay, there you go. But like we talked about earlier, go-to-market strategies change all the time. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot right now is there was a huge trend about 4 or 5 years ago, hiring for separating out lead generation from new business closing. So you'd hire a lot of BDRs and they would work in the account executive. And now what we're seeing is companies are shifting back and they're getting rid of all their BDRs and they're telling their account executives, you got to be responsible for new business generation and you've got to be responsible for closing. And then you have to be responsible for expanding those accounts too. So if you've got a job description that says basically, hey, we're hiring for an account executive, don't worry about lead generation, your BDRs are going to take care of that, and you hire based off of that, and you bring that person in and they're expecting that they're never going to have to touch a phone or set up an email sequence, and all of a sudden you tell them, by the way, you're responsible not just for new business generation, but you're also responsible for expansion. How do you think that's going to go? Do you even think that you got the right person into that position? And unfortunately, that's what happens for a lot of companies because they're going to market with stale job descriptions.
Yeah. So Ben, one of the things that's really interesting to me, and maybe you could share a little bit about this, and this is just an observation from my standpoint. Sales has gone through a massive evolution over the last 24 to 36 months, a lot of it driven by AI. And so what that's done, in my opinion, is change the native skill set that a salesperson needs to bring to the table, right? Because, with all if everyone just went on to LinkedIn right now, we would see 3 sales messages in the first 4 seconds, right? It's just ridiculous. And InMail, I literally get 3 to 5 InMails a day of people thinking I'm a staffing company, that we're all, and it's crazy. So what I think for me, it's the criteria of a salesperson is that full sales capability, but being able to be genuine and authentic and knowledgeable and being able to have a conversation rather than pitch a product or walk somebody through a sales methodology that's defined because I'm an SDR or BDR. It's almost gone back to the older sales model or sales type of person who is the full representation of their company, rather than just a piece of a process. And I'm curious, when you look at all the companies you're talking to, if you see any more examples of that.
We do. I would characterize it a little bit differently, Bill, if that's all right.
Yeah.
What the developments of the past 2 to 3 years have done is they've raised the bar on the quality of skill that a salesperson needs to bring to do their job well. Mm-hmm. Using AI for the wrong outbound practices just lets you do the wrong outbound practices more efficiently. So instead of that salesperson sending you 3 or 4 InMails saying you're a recruiting or a staffing company, now they can use AI and send you 50 of those emails. They are still as ineffective. They're just doing it, at a much higher level of volume. And what we find is when we sit in the position of buyers, the ones who are receiving all of this information, there's too much noise to cut through. And what a really effective salesperson helps you do is they're your consultant, they're basically your personal guide, and they help you cut through the noise. They kind of hold your hand and say, ignore that. That's not important. That's not important. This is what you actually need to focus on. And maybe the thing that you need to focus on is the solution they have to sell you. Sometimes the best salespeople will tell you, listen, the solution that's going to answer the question or the problem you have is not my solution. It's another one. Go talk to this person. But that skill set, that consultant skill set, and being able to do that with confidence, I would argue it's just a lot harder to do today, because there's just so much more that you have to be able to filter and guide a buyer through than 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. So thanks for expanding on that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I could talk about this all day long. So
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. No, let's get to I want to talk through, you had mentioned structured interview. I want to get to that. One thing I just want to talk about, because this came up too, is, we see a lot that teams are not aligned. And this ties back to the job description frustration as well. You go to market with a stale job description. When we start working with companies and we're helping them to set up their assessments, a lot of the times we see the team doesn't actually know what kind of salesperson they want to hire for. Mm-hmm. The VP of sales says we need to hire for an end-to-end salesperson because that's going to be the most efficient thing, and they don't want to have a fight with the CFO about opening up 2 recs instead of 1. But then the hiring manager says, no, actually we need to hire for 2 SDRs and an account executive, because they know that the market, the only way that they can kind of generate enough pipeline to hit their numbers in their market is if they have folks who are just dedicated to that. And maybe someone else has a different point of view. And, so something we encourage folks to do, and this might feel like kind of motherhood and apple pie to a talent acquisition crowd, but we really encourage the sales leaders and the hiring teams we work with to go through just a very simple alignment exercise. We say, okay, we don't have to write the job description today, but when you write the job description, you got to have an answer for each one of these 8 boxes. And ideally, that answer that the VP of sales has for what goes in each one of these 8 boxes is the same answer that their hiring manager has. And it's the same answer that talent acquisition has. Inevitably, we find that it's not. And this creates a forcing function to have a good alignment conversation, and at least make sure that you're going to market understanding exactly what it is that you're looking for.
Sure.
I'm curious, for this group, when you all think about alignment and when you all think about your business partners in sales come to you and say, we've got to open up a rec for this position. Typically, how aligned is the organization on what they're actually looking for? And if there is misalignment, at what point do you realize the misalignment happens? Or what point do you identify the misalignment?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I sometimes find with the misalignment where they will hire based off of just the person themselves, and just because they like that person so much, but that person may be a different level than what they really need. And so like maybe they'll say, well, we want to hire this person on as a sales exec rather than just a sales account manager. And I have to go, okay, well, if you're going to pay that much for this person, and I mean, is there a territory and a quota? Is the quota going to align with what you're hiring for? Just because you like them, do you really have that business need? Is what I run into quite a bit.
And what do you think is, Belinda? That's a really good point. We come across this too. What do you think is driving the motive of, when you say they like them, that's typically like the sales manager, the sales VP who says that they like this person.
Right.
What do you think is driving the sales VP to hire someone outside of the level that they need, when ultimately the sales VP is going to be the one who's accountable for this person's performance or lack of performance?
I don't think I'm understanding your question. Sorry.
I guess, when you go to the sales VP and you say you're going to hire somebody who's not at the right level, or their territory doesn't support the compensation that you want to provide, ultimately the sales VP is going to be accountable for that number, that production. Why do you think the sales VP is still, why are they willing to take that risk?
Well, sometimes are you talking about the business partner or the VP? Maybe I'm hearing you incorrect.
The business partner.
The business partner. Actually, my business partner and we have a great relationship. And we're usually aligned, and we both challenge the sales leaders together.
Yeah. I think Katie nailed it in the comments under personal relationships. I always summarize that is the hiring manager was sold. And what I simply mean by that is they got a comfortable feeling from that interview without and that gave them a degree of comfort without digging in deeper. So i.e. the person who was in there for a sales interview did a good job selling.
Selling themselves.
Yeah, 100%. That's what it is. They were the hiring manager, quote unquote, was sold by this person that they're the right person for the job.
Yeah. I actually want to talk about that a little bit. I was going to get to that later on, but let me go straight there, which is, so Bill, you talked about how important it is to use a structured interview. And, I think you're spot on. One of the things that we tell our clients is if you want to make sure you don't get sold, as Bill was saying, you need to make sure that your interview process is as close as it can be a simulation of how your clients or your prospects actually buy from you. What do I mean by that? We're a little guilty in leadership and in talent acquisition. We're a little guilty of creating this problem for ourselves because all of us, or I'm guessing most of the folks who are on this call, we care a lot about the experience that our candidates go through. And we want to provide them with an experience that has a high degree of structure, a high degree of predictability, and leaves the candidate, even if they're not the one that we select, with a relatively positive feeling about the company. Of course, no one wants to end up with like a bad Glassdoor rating or get blown up by a LinkedIn post. But what happens when we provide this kind of highly structured process is that we remove a lot of the ambiguity that salespeople encounter when they are actually going into a selling scenario. I mean, how many of you have in your companies have clients where the client or the prospect, as soon as you pick up the phone on the first call, is saying, this is how much we're going to buy. This is when we're going to buy it by. This is how much we're going to pay for it. And if you don't hear from us by Tuesday, don't worry, we went with a competitor, but we still like you anyway. It doesn't happen, right? But that's kind of the process or the structure that we provide salespeople. And so it's counterintuitive, but what we tell a lot of our clients to do is when you're interviewing just your sales team, when you're interviewing your sales team, do not provide as predictable and as structured of a process, because what you're looking for is, can the salespeople sell? Can they provide their own structure and navigate the ambiguity and potentially, don't be hostile. No one should, do not take this as an excuse to be a jerk to candidates, but can they build a relationship from like a neutral standing point? So we'll tell our clients things like, listen, you need to actively train your interview team that they should not be the ones who build rapport. Again, don't be a jerk, but you can go in and you can just be very neutral and matter of fact. And one of the things you want to measure is, if you don't build rapport, does the salesperson make an effort to try to build rapport? Are they able to warm you up if you start from a neutral place? We tell them you got to push for specifics. Something that just makes me absolutely flinch is when I see a sales resume that has like the typical resume jargon. I contributed to, or I engaged, or I led. It's like, no. Like that might fly for other business, other functions that we're working in. But when it comes to sales, I want to see I sold, and I want to see the number that you sold, and I want to see who you sold it to. And those are the only things that really matter for me.
Yeah.
And then, we talk to our clients a lot about let them close you. Leave the interview open-ended. Don't say this is when we're going to follow up by. Don't say this is what you can expect in the next round. And see if the candidate is able to, appropriately ask you, okay, when can I expect a follow-up? If I don't hear from you by Friday, is it okay if I give you a call Monday morning? can they instill a sense of urgency in you? Can they say something like, listen, I really hope we get the chance to work together. I've enjoyed our conversation, but I'm in conversations with 3 other companies and I need to be fair to them. So would you be willing to give me a decision, yes or no, by Wednesday? And see how you respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's, we talked about, I wanted to make sure we get into that. I've got some other things to share, but, and for my colleagues in talent acquisition, I'm curious to get the group's reaction to this. Is there something here, or am I just blowing hot air? I won't take it personally.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the don't build rapport, I think that's really hard, especially like in niche industries. The territories that we're looking at are really small, and a lot of people already know who they're talking to when they talk to them. And so that rapport is already there. And they've already built those personal connections and relationships with those people. And it's sometimes hard to look past that from like a hiring manager or a hiring team standpoint. In my role, we really drive in, like, look at the specifics, look at what they're talking about. Let's, have that structured hiring piece. But I think it gets lost when those relationships are already built. So I don't think you're blowing smoke. I think, you have this is valuable, but it can be hard when they are really small territories, niche roles, and everybody knows everybody, right?
Yeah.
Do you have people on the interview panel that would not know these individuals? Because that's a good way that you can bring in unbiased viewpoints. If you have folks sitting on the panel that wouldn't have any association with the individuals.
Yeah, we do. We do, like, the last part of the interview, right? They're meeting with upper leadership, but they're also getting the feedback from the field team and the hiring manager who do have those relationships, and they're, providing them with that input, like, hey, I just talked to Mary. She's great. We've worked with her for 15 years in the territory already. She knows the job in and out. So they're getting that feedback, and we've kind of, pondered whether we should withhold that feedback and just let them go into it kind of blinded. We haven't done that, but it is something that we've kind of talked about, and I do think that would be valuable.
Yeah. Katie, one of the things I used to do in hiring salespeople is I used to identify key tasks, like establishing rapport. And I used to find people in my company that were not traditionally salespeople, that would receive a lot of sales inbound calls or emails, like your CFO or somebody like that. And I used to have potential people that had made the short list function with, presentation, phone call, email writing. So we could test their ability to execute in some core competencies that they're going to need to be successful. And I used to have non-traditional people sit in that assessment role. For example, if I had 3 finalists for a sales role, I'd all make them make a cold call to my CFO. And he was a smart enough guy or gal, or I've done it in a number of companies, where they could come back and say, hey, out of the 3 people, 2 were robotic and 1 was genuinely personable. Like I would have, and so that gives me that insight. And as long as I did it consistently with everyone, I thought that was a fair way to do it. And so when I hire salespeople, I test their ability to speak over telephone. I test their ability to write in a clear and concise manner. And then I make them all come in and pitch and if I do it on Zoom, seriously, I do it on Zoom or do it in person, but I have a bunch of people from my company attend, and I give them all roles. Like, Norm, you're going to ask crazy questions like, what color does it come in? And just throw people off guard. Ben, you're going to be the nuts and bolts financial guy. So you're going to really grill them on the, and the output of putting people through that, I don't know, for me, has always given me some really good insights on who could step in and do a good job.
No, I love that idea. I don't know how sellable that is when everybody's busy. I need the slide a couple slides back that talked about how much of a waste it would be if we hired the wrong person to sell that point.
I'll send this to you.
Yeah.
Katie, the other thing I do with clients, or I suggest that clients do, is what are the common objections or put-offs that your sales team comes across? And you should be able to get this from, someone on your enablement team or your sales manager. Hopefully it's in the CRM somewhere. And then what I do is I say, we're going to build interview questions that are based on these objections. So, in my company, one of the most common objections we might get to our assessment is, hey, this sounds great, but I'm not the final decision maker. I need to speak to a colleague about this. And so, in an interview process, that might sound like, hey, Bill, really enjoyed spending time with you. Thanks for coming in. Listen, ultimately, this isn't going to be my decision. So I'm going to have to talk to some of my colleagues. And if we're going to move forward, you'll hear back from us. And I want to gauge what's their reaction to that. Do they say, okay, yep, sure, I'll just wait to hear back? Or do they say, okay, well, will I have the chance to speak to your colleagues who are going to be the final decision makers? I'd really appreciate the chance to get to meet them. I've really enjoyed our conversations, something like that. So that's another way that you can sort of try to bring this practice into your company too.
Thank you.
I did just want to say one thing, because we got a couple minutes left, and I want to not steal from Ben, but I did spend I don't know, last couple of days I put together some information that was just curious for me, because I'm fascinated by this area. Into a little white paper around what I saw as key challenges and stuff in hiring. I just dropped it in chat. If it's valuable to anybody, go take a look at it. It's got some great content in it. For me, what it helped me understand was some of the costs in there. And I put my personal experience when I hired a salesperson that cost $90K that didn't work out. I factored he cost me $500,000. Ben's number was twice as high as that. But I think what that shows, and what it made me really realize, is it goes all over the place, right? So a bad sales hire, depending on where you catch it or how long he stays, or when you hire a bad anybody, and this goes across the board, but when you mishire, that person can quickly become jaded and negative. That jaded and negative energy then goes across to whatever team they're on. And it really comes down to the emotional intelligence of the other team members of whether they buy into it. And it starts a negative feeling of disrupting culture, performance, and revenue attained. Or do they step back and say, oh, this guy's just unhappy because he's not hitting his number? And so, there's a lot. And I tried to put this into the document I put together. There's some really interesting non-hard data facts that happen when a mishire happens in a sale across all parts of the company, but specifically on sales is what I was focused on here.
Yeah, that's great. That was a great document and a great resource, Bill. Thank you. Look, we're at time, so I guess just last thing I would say is, please, guys, consider me a resource to this community. That's a QR code straight to my LinkedIn. Shoot me a connection. Let's stay in touch. We are constantly publishing. We work with about 2,000 companies and 80,000 sales people who are in seats or sales candidates each year. And we're constantly publishing research from the data that we're getting from those 80,000 assessments each year. So follow us on LinkedIn just to get some insights into other best practices, ways that you can help your partners on the sales team hire better salespeople. And if we can ever be helpful or a resource or just a sounding board, I'm available, and that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thank you very much for coming and being part of this. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for being here and sharing your thoughts and insights. Anyone has any follow-up questions? I'll put all this information and everything up in the talk stuff with the document and everything that that we've talked about today. But again, we're here as a resource. So if anything we can help with, just let us know. And I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys, for attending. I appreciate all of your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.